Committee on Intelligence, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California. Thanks for being on the show this morning.
What are you hoping to hear from the Attorney General today?
Well, certainly there are going to be a lot of questions about whether he had meetings that he didn't disclose. And I think what would be significant here is he gives the initial testimony before the Senate. It isn't accurate. He later comes back when it becomes public, it's not accurate, and clarifies the record. But if there were an additional meeting or meetings that he didn't even disclose then when he was on notice, that obviously this was of great interest to the Senate, that would be even more problematic. So that's, I think, a very fruitful line of inquiry for the Senate, but also all of the circumstances that led to the firing of Jim Comey, any facts that would corroborate Jim Comey's testimony, whether, for example, Sessions knew that the memo that Rod Rosenstein wrote would be used as pretext for firing on a completely different basis. There's a lot to ask him, and the only question really is whether he's going to be willing to answer these questions.
Gene Robinson's in Washington and has a question for you.
Congressman, what's your understanding of where the investigation is in the House? We've had these ongoing Senate hearings now, but what's happening in the House, and are we gonna see some visible manifestations of that investigation?
Yes, well, we have sent out letters to any number of witnesses to bring them in for testimony. Most of that will be in the form of interviews or depositions that'll be behind closed doors. We are also scheduling further open hearings. We have one coming up with Jay Johnson that we're just working on pinning down the date. He was one of the 3 agency heads that signed that initial statement of attribution in October that the Russians were hacking while it was going on. He was also the interface with the state elections officials, so we'll be talking about what threat the Russians pose to our elections infrastructure. And as you know, we wrote to the White House at the end of last week demanding the tapes, if they exist, as well as seeking the memoranda that would corroborate the director's testimony. I also think we ought to bring in these FBI personnel around Comey, some of whom were in the room when Comey was on the phone with the president, but others that could get the very contemporaneous recollections of those meetings right after they took place.
All right, Harold Ford.
Adam, good morning. Harold Ford. Very quickly, what sense do you have that Republicans in the House and Senate, if President Trump were to go forward with relieving or firing Bob Mueller, what sense do you have of how many Republicans might express anger and might be willing to act in a very aggressive way, either by approving a special counsel act or even going further?
I think that would, I would hope, be the last straw for many of the Republicans that have stayed their hand and not been willing to speak out. If you were to take this step with all of its echoes of Watergate, I would hope that what Congress would immediately do would be to take up an independent counsel law, maybe one that was single purpose, not that gave indefinite life to independent counsel, but rather authorize this investigation so that Bob Mueller could be reappointed, because I don't think that Congress would sit still and allow the president to pick his own investigator. Mueller is widely respected by people on both sides of the aisle, and we've heard a lot of members speak out about him since he was selected that he was the perfect choice. He was the perfect choice then. He's still the perfect choice. So I don't think Congress is going to allow this to go forward. I have to think this is just the president venting. But then again, I remember talking about whether I thought there was any chance the president would fire Comey, and that didn't seem possible either.
All right, Mike Schmidt.
Wow.
Congressman, what role is Devin Nunes, the chairman of your committee, playing in the investigation? He had said he was going to step aside, and then there were some notion that maybe he was still signing subpoenas and playing a role in the investigation. How involved is he, and does that concern you?
Well, his only involvement in the Russia investigation, but it does concern me, is that he is still insisting on signing off on the subpoenas in the Russia investigation. That authority by our rules can be delegated to Mr. Conaway with consultation with myself. That's what should have been done by now. It hasn't been done, so that does concern me.
Why hasn't it been done?
He simply refuses at this point.
But you mean even related to the Russian investigation?
Yes.
But he recused himself.
Well, exactly.
But isn't that one of the most important aspects of running an investigation, the power to subpoena witnesses?
It absolutely is, and it's indefensible. You know, the only thing I can say is thus far we have only sought to issue 4 subpoenas. He did sign off on them, but it's still inexcusable that he's ultimately a check on what the Russia investigation can do. The other part of it is there's this unmasking oversight going on. That is something that he is conducting. And I think some of the timing of what he has done there has been designed to help propagate the administration's message in a way that is not helpful to the Russia investigation.
All right.
Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sheen Robinson, final thoughts.
Well, that was actually an incredible revelation. I was not aware that Chairman Nunes was still holding on to power over subpoenas. That ought to be shouted to the heavens, and something ought to be done about it. That's not recusal.
You just shouted it to the heavens, and Harold, what did all the people say?
Amen. You certainly can you imagine a more powerful responsibility on a committee that issues subpoenas and making the decision about who issues subpoenas?
Well, I mean, this is like Jeff Sessions being a part of the conversation about firing James Comey.
Right.
Either you're recused or you're not recused. You're not half pregnant and you're not half recused. If you're recused, you get out of the room.
Right. But
On
all matters.
On all matters. And for Devin Nunes, it's not just about being in the room in this investigation. Everyone knows. We were all warned. You know, if the Democrats take control of Congress, we won't have the power of subpoena anymore. Or, you know, if the Democrats take control, that's the power, and Nunes is still holding it, so he's not recused. The Republicans need to pass that along.
The Trump administration has shown us many things we've never seen before, and one of them is apparently a new definition for the word recuse.
Yeah.
Michael Schmidt.
But at what level would the Democrats stop cooperating? What I wanted to ask Congressman is, at what level would they stop cooperating? So if this guy says, I'm recused, I'm still signing the subpoenas, but the Democrats are continuing to cooperate, at what level would they stop?
Well, he has signed all 4 of the ones that have been signed so far.
But still, I mean, no one needs to go
So
to
I think it's hard for them
Which
to
ones
walk.
hasn't
No
he
one
signed?
needs
Which
to
ones
go to
hasn't he
Devin
signed?
Nunes to ask for a hall pass. He's recused himself.
Right.
He needs to be recused. And it is the Republicans on that committee that need to go to him and say, you've recused yourself. You're undermining the investigation. Get the hell out of here.
And that falls to Speaker Ryan.
pertains to
That
Georgia.
falls to Speaker Ryan.
Well, Speaker Ryan, I'm sure he'll do the right thing. Speaker Ryan needs to tell
I hope
Devin
so.
Nunes, thank you for your service. Now pass along the
And
power.
Speaker Ryan is
to
not
give
new
the
at
subpoena.
this, so he probably will do the right thing.
I know he will.
He will.
We have much more on today's big hearings with Jeff Sessions. Senator Dick Blumenthal from the Judiciary Committee will be our next guest. We
Plus-
also invite any Republicans on that committee to call us in. We will take your phone calls and gladly talk to you.
As
Only
long as
thing
you
you have to
want.
do, you can reverse the charges, we'll pay for the charges, but also you have to tell me why I am a great host and why this is the greatest honor in your life to be talking to me. But now you don't have to do that. Just call us in. We'd love to talk to you. What else do we have, Mika?
2 of the nation's top lawyers accuse President Trump of violating the Constitution. The attorneys general of Washington, D.C. and Maryland break down their lawsuit against the commander-in-chief.
That's not Bill Battle. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.